Imagine you are standing in the parking lot of a luxury hotel in Houston, Texas. The air is thick and humid. The date is July 24th, 2002. A silver Mercedes-Benz S430, a car that symbolizes wealth, success, and the American dream, is revving its engine. Behind the wheel sits a woman. She is beautiful. She is wealthy. She is a former beauty queen. But look closely at her eyes. There is no life in them anymore. There is only a fire that has consumed everything else. In the passenger seat, a teenage girl is screaming, "Mom, don't do it. Stop." But the woman doesn't hear her. Her gaze is fixed on a man walking across the asphalt. A man she has loved for 10 years. A man she built an empire with. He is walking away from her, towards the lobby, indifferent to her pain. She shifts the car into drive. She doesn't just hit the gas pedal, she floors it. The luxury car, weighing over 2 tons, launches forward like a missile. The sound of the impact echoes through the humid night. But she doesn't stop. She circles back. Once, twice, 3 times. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a slip of the foot. This was the moment when a perfect wife decided that if her heart was going to break, she would shatter the world along with it. The crime was so shocking, so public, that it was captured on video by the very private investigator she had hired to save her marriage. Tonight, under the sound of the rain, we unravel the tragedy of Clara Harris, the dentist who engineered the perfect life, and the murder that proved that money can buy everything except loyalty. To understand the rage, we must first understand the love. Clara and David Harris were the power couple of Friendswood, Texas. They were the people you looked at and envied. Both of them were dentists. Brilliant, hardworking, and ambitious. David was charming, handsome, and charismatic. He was an orthodontist who knew how to make people smile. Clara was the brains. She was a perfectionist. She managed the business, handled the finances, and ensured their dental empire ran like a well-oiled machine. They lived in a mansion that cost nearly $1 million. They drove expensive cars. They had twin boys. From the outside, it was a fairy tale. Clara, originally from Colombia, had achieved the ultimate American dream. She had worked her way up. She was a former beauty queen in her home country, and now she was a respected doctor in Texas. But inside the walls of their dental practice, cracks were forming. David was a man who loved attention. He loved being the center of the room, and as he approached his mid-40s, he began to feel restless. Clara, on the other hand, was exhausted. She was raising the twins, running the business, and trying to keep up with David's high demands. She noticed he was becoming distant. He was staying late at the office. He was buying new clothes. And then he hired a new receptionist. Her name was Gail Bridges. She was different from Clara. She was formerly married, earthy, and had a relaxed vibe that Clara, with her high-strung perfectionism, didn't have. David started spending a lot of time at the front desk. Whispers began in the office, but Clara didn't want to believe it. Not David. Not her David. Most women, when they suspect cheating, might get angry. They might file for divorce. Clara Harris did something else. She decided to compete. She convinced herself that if David was wandering, it was her fault. She thought, if I can just be perfect enough, he will come back. This is the most heartbreaking part of the story. Clara began a frantic mission to transform herself. She hired a personal trainer and worked out until her muscles ached. She went to a plastic surgeon. She had liposuction. She had breast augmentation. She changed her hair. She bought a whole new wardrobe of designer clothes. She spent thousands of dollars trying to become the woman she thought David wanted. And for a moment, it seemed to work. David complimented her. He told her she looked beautiful, but it was a lie. While Clara was recovering from surgery, in pain and bandaged, David was taking long lunches with Gail Bridges. He was buying Gail gifts. He was taking her to expensive dinners. Clara was fighting for a marriage that David had already left. The breaking point came when Clara found the receipts. Not just receipts for dinners, but hotel receipts. And then, the confrontation. David admitted it. "Yes, I like her," he said. "She listens to me." Clara was devastated, but she made him promise to end it. David swore on the lives of their children. "It's over," he said. "I choose you, Clara. I choose our family." He promised to fire Gail. He promised to cut all contact. Clara, desperate to believe him, forgave him. Trust, once broken, is like a shattered mirror. You can glue it back together, but you can still see the cracks in your reflection. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that David was lying. It was July 2002, just days after his promise to end the affair. David told Clara he was going to a dinner at the Nassau Bay Hilton. He said it was just a business meeting with some colleagues. Nothing to worry about. Clara wanted to believe him, but her intuition screamed no. So, she did what any wealthy, suspicious wife in Texas would do. She opened the phone book and found a number 4 Blue Moon Investigations. She hired a private investigator named Lindsay, coincidentally the same name as her stepdaughter. She told the PI, "Go to the Hilton. See if he's alone. I just need to know." On the evening of July 24th, the investigator arrived at the hotel. She set up her camera. She zoomed in on the lobby, and there he was, David Harris. But he wasn't with colleagues. He wasn't in a meeting. He was walking hand in hand with Gail Bridges. They looked happy. They looked in love. The PI called Clara. "He's here," the investigator said, "and she's with him." Clara didn't cry. She went cold. She was at home with her stepdaughter, Lindsay, David's teenage daughter from a previous marriage. Clara hung up the phone. She looked at Lindsay and said, "He's with her. We're going to catch him." This was the fatal mistake. She brought the daughter. She wanted a witness. She wanted David to be shamed in front of his own child. They got into the silver Mercedes S430. Clara drove into the night, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When Clara arrived at the Hilton, she was a woman possessed. The private investigator was still there, filming. Clara stormed into the lobby. She found David and Gail coming out of the elevator. They had likely just come from a room. The sight of them together snapped something in Clara's brain. She lunged. It was chaos. Clara attacked Gail. She ripped Gail's shirt. She was screaming, crying, a whirlwind of fury. Hotel security guards rushed in. They grabbed Clara. They pinned her to the ground. David stood there, looking more annoyed than remorseful. "You're crazy," he yelled at Clara. "This is why I'm leaving you." The security guards escorted them out. They told Clara she had to leave the property immediately or she would be arrested. They walked her to her car. David and Gail were escorted separately to Gail's car. This should have been the end of the night. Clara should have driven away, filed for divorce the next morning, and taken him for every penny he had. She had the evidence. She had the moral high ground. But adrenaline is a dangerous drug. Clara got into her Mercedes. Her stepdaughter, Lindsay, was in the passenger seat, crying, begging her to just go home. "Let's go, Mom. Please. Let's just go." Clara started the engine, but she didn't put it in reverse. She waited. The layout of the parking lot is crucial here. David Harris walked Gail to her SUV. He said goodbye. Then, He began to walk back toward the hotel lobby, crossing the parking lot alone. He assumed Clara had left. He assumed the drama was over. He was wrong. From her spot in the parking lot, Clara saw him. The man who promised to end it. The man she had surgery for. The man she built a life with. According to the testimony given later in court, Clara looked at her stepdaughter and said a sentence that would seal her fate. "I'm going to hit him." Lindsay screamed, "No, Mom, no." Clara slammed her foot on the accelerator. The Mercedes S430 has a V8 engine. It has power. It surged forward. David Harris heard the sound. He turned his head. He had a split second to realize what was happening. He tried to jump out of the way. But you cannot outrun a car. The impact was sickening. The car hit him, throwing him into the air. He landed on the asphalt about 25 feet away. If Clara had stopped there, he might have survived. It might have been ruled an accident caused by distress. But she didn't stop. The private investigator, still filming from across the lot, captured what happened next. Clara drove over the median. She turned the wheel. She drove over his body. Then she put the car in reverse. She backed over him. Then she put it in drive again. She circled the body. It wasn't just a hit and run. It was an erasure. She was trying to crush the source of her pain into the pavement. Inside the car, Lindsay was fighting for the steering wheel, hitting Clara, screaming in absolute terror. Finally, the car stopped. The silence after the engine cut off was heavier than the humid air. Clara opened the door. She ran to David's body. The rage had evaporated instantly, replaced by the horror of what she had done. She fell to her knees beside him. "David, David, talk to me," she screamed. She tried to perform CPR, but it was useless. The damage was catastrophic. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The private investigator stood frozen, holding the camera that contained the evidence of a murder. When the police arrived, they found a scene of madness. A hysterical woman covered in her husband's blood. A traumatized teenage girl sitting in the car, unable to speak. And a dead doctor lying under the lights of a luxury hotel. Clara was arrested on the spot. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. "I loved him so much," she kept repeating to the officers. "I just wanted him to stop hurting me." The trial of Clara Harris was a media circus. It had everything: sex, money, Mercedes, and murder. The defense tried to argue sudden passion. In Texas law, if you can prove you acted under the immediate influence of sudden passion arising from an adequate cause, the sentence is lighter. They painted Clara as a victim of gaslighting, a woman pushed to the brink by a manipulative husband and a ruthless mistress. But the prosecution had two powerful weapons. First, the video from the private investigator. It showed the car circling. It showed intent. Second, the testimony of Lindsay Harris, the stepdaughter. Imagine the pain of that girl, sitting in the witness stand, pointing at her stepmother and telling the jury. She said she was going to hit him. I begged her to stop. The jury deliberated. They felt sympathy for Clara. They really did. No one liked David Harris by the end of the trial. He was exposed as a serial cheater and a liar. But murder is murder. On February 14th, 2003, Valentine's Day, ironically, Clara Harris was found guilty of murder. However, the jury did find that she acted under sudden passion. This saved her from a life sentence. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Clara Harris served 15 years. She was released on parole in 2018. She is a free woman now, but she is no longer a dentist. She is no longer wealthy. She is no longer a mother to the twins she left behind that night. Her sons were raised by relatives. They grew up knowing their mother killed their father. The story of Clara Harris is a modern Greek tragedy. It asks us a terrifying question. How close are we to the edge? Clara wasn't a criminal. She was a doctor, a community leader, a good person. But under the right pressure, with the right amount of betrayal and humiliation, the line between sanity and madness vanished. David Harris paid for his betrayal with his life. Clara Harris paid for her revenge with her freedom. And the only legacy left of their perfect empire is a grainy videotape in a police evidence locker, showing a silver car circling in the dark. Imagine a Saturday morning in Cary, North Carolina. It is July 12, 2008. The air is thick with humidity. The sky is gray, threatening a storm. In these perfectly manicured neighborhoods, where every lawn is green and every house looks like a castle, people feel safe. It is consistently voted one of the safest cities in America. At 6:40 a.m., the streets are quiet. A woman is supposedly lacing up her running shoes. Her name is Nancy Cooper. She is beautiful, energetic, the mother of 2 young daughters. She is the heart of her social circle. According to her husband, she opened the front door, stepped out into the humid morning air to go for a jog, and simply vanished. But there's a problem with this story. While the neighborhood slept, there was someone awake inside the Cooper house. Someone sitting behind a glowing computer screen. Someone typing code. Someone manipulating maps. Someone who was meticulously crafting a digital reality to cover up physical brutality. This wasn't a kidnapping. This wasn't a stranger lurking in the bushes. This was a crime of cold, calculated revenge. A husband who decided that if his wife wanted to leave him, he would delete her from existence, just like a file on his hard drive. But he forgot one thing. In the digital world, nothing is ever truly deleted, and the very technology he used to build his lie would become the weapon that destroyed him. Tonight, listen to the rain, and let's enter the quiet, terrifying world of Brad Cooper, the man who thought he was smarter than the police, smarter than the system, and smarter than justice itself. To understand the tragedy, we have to look at the illusion. Brad and Nancy Cooper look like the American dream personified. Nancy was 34 years old. She was vibrant, social, and loved by everyone. She was originally from Canada, and she had that welcoming, friendly spirit that drew people to her. Brad was 34 as well. He was different. He was a brilliant telecommunications engineer working for Cisco systems. He was the tech guy. Quiet, analytical, perhaps a bit awkward socially, but successful. They lived in Lockmere, a wealthy subdivision in Cary, a place with lakes, tennis courts, and walking trails. They had 2 beautiful twin daughters. From the outside, they had it all. The big house, the high salary, the luxury cars. But inside the walls of 104, Walsbrook Court, the air was suffocating. Brad was not just quiet. He was controlling. He managed the money with an iron fist. He tracked Nancy's spending. He monitored her movements. Nancy, a woman full of life, felt like she was shrinking. Friends noticed that Brad would make demeaning comments to her in public. He would criticize her parenting. He would stare at her with a cold, blank expression that made people uncomfortable. By 2008, the marriage was effectively dead. Nancy had reached her breaking point. She told her friends, "I'm done. I'm leaving him." She had even secretly toured an apartment. She was planning to sign the lease. She was planning to take the girls and start over. For a man like Brad, a man who needed to control every variable in his environment, this was not a heartbreak. It was an insult. It was a loss of ownership. And he wasn't going to let it happen. Friday, July 11th, 2008. The Coopers hosted a small get-together at their house. Neighbors came over. To the guests, the tension in the room was palpable. It was thick enough to cut with a knife. Nancy was trying to be the gracious hostess, laughing and chatting. Brad was sitting in the corner, brooding. He was barely speaking. His eyes followed Nancy around the room, not with love, but with calculation. One neighbor later testified that Nancy whispered to her in the kitchen, "I'm signing the lease on Monday. I'm finally getting out." She was hopeful. She saw a light at the end of the tunnel. The party ended around midnight. The guests went home. The doors were locked. The lights went out. We don't know exactly what happened in the early hours of that morning, but we know that Nancy never signed that lease. We know that the freedom she was so close to touching was snatched away in the dark. Saturday morning, July 12th. The storm had passed, but the ground was wet. Around noon, a friend of Nancy's, Jessica, called the house. She and Nancy had plans to go painting. Brad answered the phone. He sounded calm, almost bored. "She's not here," he said. "She went for a jog this morning around 7 a.m. and hasn't come back yet." Jessica felt a knot form in her stomach immediately. Nancy was a runner, yes, but she never ran for 5 hours. And she certainly wouldn't miss a planned outing with a friend. And she would never, ever leave her children for that long without checking in. "Did you call her cell phone?" Jessica asked. "No," Brad said. "She didn't take it. She just took her house key." Jessica drove to the house immediately. She found Brad in the driveway, washing his car. Let that image sink in. His wife has been missing for 6 hours. A storm is brewing again, and he is washing his car. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't calling hospitals. He was scrubbing the floor mats of his vehicle. Jessica panicked. She called the police. When the officers arrived, Brad played the part of the confused husband. He told them, "She runs the trail around the lake. She usually takes about an hour. I don't know where she is." He even gave them a specific detail. He said he saw her running out the door, wearing a gray shirt and black shorts. The search began. Neighbors, police, helicopters. Cary is a safe town. People don't just vanish. But as the sun went down on Saturday, there was no sign of Nancy. And Brad, he went to the grocery store. He bought juice for the kids. He acted like it was a normal weekend, just with one person missing. Monday, July 14th. The search parties were combing the woods near the Lockmere subdivision. About 3 miles from the Cooper home, there was an unfinished construction site. A lonely road leading to nowhere. A police officer walking the perimeter smelled something. He followed the scent to a storm drain, near a creek. There, floating in the muddy water, they found her. Nancy Cooper. She was still wearing her diamond earrings. Her wedding ring was still on her hand. This ruled out robbery immediately, but there was something chilling about her appearance. She was wearing a black bra, but she wasn't wearing a shirt. She wasn't wearing shoes. Brad had said she went jogging. Who goes jogging without shoes? Who goes jogging in just a bra? The autopsy revealed she had been strangled. It was personal. It was up close. The medical examiner determined she had died sometime early Saturday morning. The police turned their eyes to the husband. But Brad Cooper had an ace up his sleeve, or so he thought. When detectives brought Brad in for questioning, he was arrogant. He told them, "I was home all morning with the kids. I was on my computer. You can check." He claimed he woke up at 6:15 a.m. Nancy left for her run at 6:40 a.m., and he spent the next few hours working on his laptop. Police seized his computer, a Cisco laptop. They gave it to their forensic analysts. At first glance, it looked like Brad was telling the truth. The logs showed activity. Emails were sent. A phone call was made to his parents in Canada at 6:45 a.m. How could he kill his wife, dispose of her body 3 miles away, and be back in time to send emails? It seemed like the perfect alibi, but Brad made a mistake. He underestimated the FBI. The local police called in the FBI's cyber action team. These agents dug deeper than the surface logs. They looked at the metadata, the data about the data. They found something strange. On the day before the murder, Friday at 1:15 p.m., someone had zoomed in on a map on Brad's computer. Not just any map. A Google map of the exact spot where Nancy's body was found. The construction site. The storm drain. Why was a tech engineer looking at an obscure, unfinished road on a map 24 hours before his wife was found dead there? But Brad had an explanation. "I didn't look at that," he said. "Maybe I was just scrolling." The FBI dug deeper. They found that during the critical window between 6:40 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Saturday, the computer activity was fake. Brad had manipulated the timestamps on his emails, but the smoking gun was a Google Map spoof. This is complex, so listen closely. Brad knew the police would look at the router logs to see if he was home. So he wrote a script, a piece of code, to simulate activity. But he planted a file on his computer, a Google Map file, that was timestamped at 7 a.m. Saturday. He wanted to prove he was looking at maps at 7 a.m. But the forensic analysis showed that this file wasn't created at 7 a.m. It was created days earlier and modified to look like it was opened at 7 a.m. He had spent days coding his own alibi. He treated the murder of his wife like a software bug that needed to be patched. While the digital evidence was damning, the physical evidence was filling in the gaps. Remember the car wash? When Jessica found Brad washing his car, he was scrubbing the floor mats. Police analyzed the trunk of his car. Even though he had cleaned it, they found microscopic particles, leaves, dirt, and a specific type of algae found only in the creek where Nancy was discovered. And then there was the video. Surveillance footage from a local Harris Teeter grocery store. Early that Saturday morning, a man matching Brad's description was seen buying heavy-duty trash bags and detergent. Why does a man whose wife is jogging need heavy-duty cleaning supplies at 7:30 a.m.? The timeline became clear. Nancy didn't go for a jog. She never left the house alive. Sometime in the early morning, perhaps after an argument about the divorce, Brad strangled her. He put her body in the trunk of his car. He drove her to the spot he had scouted on Google Maps the day before. He dumped her in the creek. He drove home. He cleaned the car. He logged onto his computer to launch his fake alibi program. And then, he waited for someone to call. The trial began in 2011. It was a battle of geeks. The prosecution brought in FBI experts to explain the Google Map spoofing. The defense tried to argue that the computer evidence was tampered with, but the jury saw the bigger picture. They saw a man who had lost control. They saw a man who was about to lose his wife and his children. And they saw a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. The most chilling moment was when they discussed the revenge aspect. Brad didn't just kill her. He tried to erase her dignity. He dumped her half-naked in a ditch. He tried to paint her as a reckless woman who ran off and got killed. It was the ultimate act of possession. If you try to leave me, I will discard you like trash. Nancy's friends testified about her fear. He stares at me, she had told them. He checks the odometer on my car. It was a classic case of domestic coercive control escalating to homicide. The jury deliberated. On May 5th, 2011, Brad Cooper was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. Brad Cooper sits in a prison cell today. He still maintains his innocence. He still claims the police framed him. But the code doesn't lie. Nancy Cooper wanted to be free. She wanted a new apartment. She wanted peace for her daughters. She was hours away from signing that lease. She didn't make it, but in a way, she did escape him. Her daughters were raised by her family in Canada, far away from the toxicity of their father. Nancy is remembered not as the victim in the creek, but as the vibrant, loving mother who tried to save her children. This story is a modern warning. We live in a world of screens, data, and digital footprints. Brad Cooper thought technology would save him. He thought he could write a code to cover a murder. But he forgot that behind every screen, there's a human truth, and no amount of coding can delete the stain of taking a life. Imagine you are lying in bed. It is 2 a.m. The house is dark. The only sound is the rhythmic breathing of your spouse sleeping beside you. You feel safe. You lock the front door. You check the back door. You are in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood in California where nothing bad ever happens. But what you don't know is that you are not alone. Someone is in the hallway, and he didn't just break in 5 minutes ago. He has been in your house for hours. He was in the closet while you were eating dinner. He was under the bed while you were brushing your teeth. He has been waiting patiently in the shadows, watching you live your life, waiting for the moment you close your eyes. This isn't a ghost story. This is the reality of the Golden State Killer. For over 10 years, he terrorized California. He didn't just kill, he played games. He would tie up a husband and place dishes on his back, whispering, "If I hear these dishes rattle, I will kill everyone." He turned the sanctity of the home into a theater of psychological torture. He committed 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 120 burglaries. And then he vanished. For 40 years, he was a phantom, a shadow without a name, until a retired detective, a true crime writer, and a genealogy website conspired to pull the mask off the face of evil. Tonight, lock your windows. Check the closet, because we are going back to the 1970s to hunt the man who made an entire state afraid of the dark. It started quietly, too quietly. Visalia, California. 1974, a small, sleepy farming town. People started noticing strange things in their homes. They would come home from work and find small disruptions. A picture frame moved. A drawer left open. But then it got weirder. Items were missing, but not expensive items. The burglar didn't take the jewelry or the cash. He took photographs. He took a single earring. He took piggy banks. He was collecting souvenirs, but he was also leaving things behind. Homeowners would find bullets placed on their pillows. They would find their underwear scattered in the hallway. It was a message. I was here. I can get to you. Police called him the Visalia Ransacker. They thought he was just a creepy burglar. They didn't realize that this was the training ground. The ransacker was practicing. He was learning how to move silently. He was learning how to escape. And in 1975, he decided he was ready for something darker. He packed his bags. He moved north to Sacramento, and the burglary spree turned into a nightmare. Sacramento, 1976. The suburbs were booming. It was a time of open windows and unlocked doors. Then the attacks began. The pattern was terrified and specific. The attacker always wore a ski mask. He always shone a bright flashlight into the victim's eyes, so they couldn't see him. He spoke through clenched teeth, a guttural whisper that sounded like a demon. He would wake couples up in the middle of the night. This is where the psychological horror sets in. He would tie the husband up first. He used complex knots, shoelaces, drapery cords. Then the dishes trick. He would stack cups and saucers on the husband's back. "If I hear them fall," he would whisper, "I will kill her." Imagine being that husband, lying face down in the dark, terrified to breathe, terrified to muscle twitch, knowing that the life of the person you love depends on your absolute stillness. The attacker would spend hours in the house. He would go to the kitchen and eat their food. He would drink their beer. Survivors reported hearing the refrigerator door open and close while they were tied up in the bedroom. The casualness of it was the most terrifying part. He felt entitled to their home. Panic swept Sacramento. Hardware stores sold out of locks. Gun sales skyrocketed. Neighborhood watch meetings were held. At one famous town hall meeting, a man stood up. He was angry. He said, "I can't believe this is happening. No one could do that to me and my wife. I wouldn't let him." The next night, the killer attacked that man and his wife. He had been at the meeting. He was watching. He was listening. For 3 years, he terrorized Sacramento. Then he moved again, to the Bay Area, then to Southern California. As he moved south, his violence escalated. He was no longer satisfied with terror. He wanted to extinguish life. Goleta, California, 1979. Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend were found dead. The killer had entered the house. He had tied them up. But this time he didn't leave. The Golden State Killer had been born. The murders were brutal. Bludgeoning. Shooting. He targeted couples in upscale neighborhoods. Brian and Katie Majori. Lyman and Charlene Smith. Sherry Domingo and Gregory Sanchez. The list of names grew. The police were baffled. Why? Because in the 1980s, police departments didn't talk to each other like they do now. The detectives in Sacramento didn't know that the guy in Santa Barbara was the same guy. They thought they were hunting 3 different monsters: the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the original Night Stalker. It would take years to realize they were all the same man. Then, in 1986, the attack stopped. Just like that. He killed 18-year-old Janelle Cruz in Irvine, California. And then silence. He vanished into the ethos. Did he die? Did he go to prison for something else? Did he move? But he didn't disappear completely. He liked to taunt. Over the years, survivors would receive phone calls. Imagine this. It's 1991, 5 years after the last murder. The phone rings at a victim's house. She picks it up. Silence. Then heavy breathing. Then a voice she never forgot. "Gonna kill you. Gonna kill you." Or sometimes just, "Merry Christmas." He was still out there. He was watching the news. He was checking up on them. He wanted them to know that he hadn't forgotten. This created a state of perpetual fear. The victims grew older, but they never felt safe. Every creak in the floorboard, every wrong number on the phone brought the trauma back. Decades passed. The case went ice cold. The files gathered dust in basement lockers. But there was a writer, a woman named Michelle McNamara. She became obsessed with the case. She spent her nights poring over police reports, autopsy files, and maps. She coined the name, the Golden State Killer. She wrote a book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. She believed that the answer was hiding in plain sight. She kept the pressure on. Sadly, Michelle passed away before she could see the end of the story. But her work lit a fire under the investigation. Enter Paul Holes, a detective who had been chasing this ghost for 24 years. He was about to retire. But he had one last idea. DNA. They had the killer's DNA from the crime scenes, but it didn't match anyone in the criminal database, Cody's. Paul Holes thought, what if we use a genealogy website, like the ones people use to find their family trees? It was a legal gray area. It was a long shot. They uploaded the killer's DNA to a site called GeneMatch. They waited. The system processed millions of profiles. And then a hit. Not the killer, but a third cousin, a distant relative who had innocently uploaded their DNA to find out about their heritage. This is where the detective work becomes forensic art. 5 investigators sat in a room. They built a massive family tree, starting from that third cousin. They went back to the great-great-grandparents in the 1800s. Then they moved forward. They looked for a male who lived in Visalia in 1974, a male who lived in Sacramento in 1976, a male who lived in Southern California in 1980, a male who was the right age. Branch by branch, they eliminated suspects. This one was in the Army overseas. Cross him out. This one was too young. Cross him out. This one died in 1980. Cross him out. Finally, they were left with one name. A name that wasn't on any suspect list. Joseph James D'Angelo. Who was he? The revelation was shocking. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a weirdo living in a cave. He was a former police officer. Let that sink in. The man terrorizing the community was a man sworn to protect it. This explained everything. It explained why he knew how to avoid fingerprints. It explained how he knew police response times. It explained why he shone flashlights in victims' eyes, a classic police tactic. It explained the tactical way he moved. He had been fired from the police force in 1979 for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. After that, he worked as a truck mechanic. He lived in a quiet suburb in Citrus Heights, Sacramento. He had a wife. He had 3 daughters. He mowed his lawn. He complained about loud neighbors. He was the grumpy old man next door. April 24th, 2018. Surveillance teams watched D'Angelo's house. He was 72 years old now, a frail old man. They watched him leave his house to go for a walk, but they needed his DNA to be 100% sure. They waited for him to touch something. Finally, they retrieved a tissue he discarded, or a swab from his car door handle. They rushed it to the lab. The call came back. It's a match. The team moved in. As D'Angelo stepped out onto his driveway, officers swarmed him. He looked confused. He was just an old man in typical dad clothes. When he realized what was happening, he started muttering to himself. He claimed he had an inner personality named Jerry, who made him do it. I pushed him out, he whispered. I did all those things. I destroyed all those lives. The news broke. The world stopped. The Golden State Killer wasn't a ghost. He was Joe, the mechanic, the dad, the grandpa. Victims who had lived in fear for 40 years finally exhaled. In June 2020, Joseph D'Angelo sat in a makeshift courtroom, a university ballroom, to accommodate the social distancing and the hundreds of victims. He sat in a wheelchair, looking weak and frail. Many believed the frail old man act was just that, an act. Another manipulation. The judge read the charges. Guilty, D'Angelo rasped. Guilty, guilty. 26 times he said it. He admitted to 13 murders and dozens of rapes. Then came the victim impact statements. For days, survivors stood up. Women who were attacked in their beds 40 years ago. Children of the murdered couples. They looked him in the eye. One survivor said, You are not a monster. You are just a pathetic little man. Another said, I have lived my life. I have loved. I have won. You have lived in a cage of your own making. The judge sentenced him to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. He will die in prison. The mask was finally removed. 49:00 Conclusion. The open window. The capture of the Golden State Killer changed everything. It launched a new era of solving cold cases. Since his arrest, hundreds of murderers have been caught using the same genetic genealogy technique. His legacy of terror inadvertently created the tool that will destroy other monsters like him. But the story leaves us with a chilling thought. Joseph D'Angelo lived a normal life for 40 years after his crimes. He went to family barbecues. He went to work. He bought groceries. He walked among us. How many others are out there? How many secrets are hidden behind the doors of the quiet houses on your street? Tonight, as the storm rages outside, you might check your window one more time. And that's okay, because the monsters are real, but so are the people who hunt them. Bonita Springs, Florida, a place where the sun shines 300 days a year, a paradise of palm trees, gated communities, and wealth. It is the kind of place people move to when they want to live the good life. In this quiet corner of the world, Dr. Teresa Sievers was a local celebrity. She wasn't just a doctor, she was a healer. She ran a holistic medical practice, focusing on women's health, hormones, and aging. Her patients didn't just like her, they revered her. She was vibrant, energetic, and full of life. She was the woman who had it all. A thriving career, a beautiful home, 2 lovely daughters, and a husband, Mark Sievers, who worked by her side managing the office. To the outside world, Mark and Teresa were the power couple. They were always together. They finished each other's sentences. They posted smiling photos on Facebook. But photos don't make noise. They don't show the screaming matches behind closed doors. They don't show the cold silence at the dinner table. And they certainly don't show the darkness growing in the heart of a man who feels overshadowed by his wife's success. In June 2015, that darkness would finally spill over. Dr. Sievers would come home early from a family vacation, expecting a quiet night before getting back to work. She unlocked her front door. She deactivated the alarm. She walked into her kitchen, and she never walked out. What followed was not a simple investigation into a burglary gone wrong. It was a journey into a twisted conspiracy involving burner phones, a cross-country road trip, and a betrayal so personal, so intimate, that it shocked even the most hardened detectives. Tonight, as the rain falls against your window, we're going to unravel the tangled web of the Sievers family. We will see how a marriage built on love turned into a contract for murder. Teresa Sievers was the breadwinner. She was the talent. Mark Sievers was the manager. On paper it worked, but in reality, the dynamic was toxic. Mark was described by friends as controlling. He was always there, lurking in the background. He managed the finances, the schedule, the house. But financially, they were drowning. The IRS had put a lien on their property. They owed tens of thousands of dollars. The perfect life was being funded by credit cards and debt. Teresa was stressed. She told friends she was tired of carrying the weight of the family. She was tired of Mark's lack of ambition. There were whispers of divorce. But Mark couldn't afford a divorce. Without Teresa, he was nothing. He had no career of his own. He would lose the house, the status, the children. In June 2015, the family went to Connecticut for a reunion. It was supposed to be a happy time, but Mark seemed distant. On Sunday, June 28th, Teresa flew back to Florida alone. She had patients to see on Monday morning. Mark and the children stayed behind in Connecticut. It was the perfect alibi. How could a husband kill his wife if he was 1,000 miles away? Surrounded by witnesses, Mark drove Teresa to the airport. He kissed her goodbye. He knew, as he watched her walk through security, that he would never see her alive again, because Mark Sievers didn't need to pull the trigger himself. He had outsourced his evil. Monday morning came. Dr. Sievers didn't show up for work. This was unheard of. Teresa was punctuality personified. Her staff called her phone, straight to voicemail. They called Mark in Connecticut. Mark played the role of the worried husband perfectly. "I can't reach her," he said. "Can someone go to the house and check on her?" A friend went to the Sievers' residence. The car was in the driveway. The friend knocked. No answer. He went around the back. The lanai door was unlocked. He stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And then he saw it. In the kitchen, lying on the floor, was Dr. Teresa Sievers. It was a brutal scene. She had been attacked with a hammer. It wasn't quick. It was rage-filled. But something was strange. Teresa was still wearing her necklace. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. There was cash in her purse. If this was a robbery, it was the worst robbery in history. The intruders had ignored thousands of dollars in valuables and focused entirely on killing the woman of the house. Police arrived. They taped off the scene. Mark Sievers flew home immediately. He cried. He held his daughters. He planned a funeral. But detectives noticed something about Mark. His grief felt rehearsed, and he seemed very interested in the life insurance policies. 5 separate policies, totaling nearly $4.4 million. Suddenly, the motive wasn't a mystery anymore. Detectives had a hunch about Mark, but they had a problem. Mark was in Connecticut when the murder happened. His alibi was ironclad. So, they looked for external clues. They received a tip. A neighbor had heard voices. And more importantly, a surveillance camera down the street had captured a vehicle. A van. No, a white Hyundai Elantra. A rental car. Police ran a search on rental cars in the area. They found a match. A white Hyundai Elantra rented, not in Florida, but in Missouri. Why would a car rented in Missouri be cruising through a neighborhood in Bonita Springs, Florida, on the night of the murder? This is where technology changed the game. The car was rented by a man named Curtis Wainwright. Who was Curtis Wainwright? Detectives dug into his background and found a connection that made their blood run cold. Curtis Wainwright was Mark Sievers' best friend. They had known each other since childhood. They grew up together in Missouri. But it was more than friendship. They looked alike. They were both tall, bald, heavy-set men. They called each other brother. And just weeks before the murder, Mark Sievers had traveled to Missouri for his best friend's wedding. Police suspected that the wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a planning session. Curtis Wainwright was smart. He was a computer whiz. He thought he could outsmart the police. He rented a car, drove 1,100 miles to Florida, killed the doctor, and drove back. He left his cell phone at home in Missouri to create a digital alibi. But he made one fatal mistake. He rented a car with a built-in GPS navigation system, and he forgot to erase the history. When police seized the rental records, they didn't just see the mileage. They saw the route. The GPS data was a map of the murder. It showed the car leaving Missouri. It showed the car stopping at a Walmart in Florida to buy supplies, black towels, shoes, lockpicking kits. It showed the car driving to the Sievers' home. It showed the car parked outside the house at the exact time Teresa came home. And then, it showed the car driving back to Missouri. It was the smoking gun of the 21st century. But Curtis wasn't alone in the car. The GPS showed the car stopping at the home of another man, Jimmy Rogers. Jimmy was different. He wasn't a computer guy. He was a man with a violent record. He was the hammer. Curtis was the brain. Jimmy was the muscle. Mark was the architect. 26:30, Chapter 5. The burner phones. Police had the car. They had the men. But they needed to connect them to Mark. They subpoenaed Mark's phone records. Mark was careful. He used his regular phone for normal things. But he had a second phone. A burner phone. And so did Curtis. The record showed a flurry of communication between Mark's burner phone and Curtis's burner phone in the weeks leading up to the murder. They didn't speak in plain English. They used code. Did you get the prescription? Is the package delivered? But there was one text message that shattered the code. Right after the murder, when the news broke that Dr. Sievers was dead, Curtis texted Mark. Holy S asterisk asterisk asterisk. Mark didn't reply with shock. He didn't ask what happened. He simply went silent. He knew the job was done. The police arrested Curtis Wayne Wright and Jimmy Rogers first. Mark Sievers remained free for months. He walked around Bonita Springs, living in the house where his wife was murdered, seemingly confident that his friends wouldn't flip on him. He was wrong. 31:45, Chapter 6. The best friend flips. Prison is a hard place, and loyalty is rare when you are facing the death penalty. Curtis Wayne Wright, the childhood best friend, the brother, looked at the evidence. He saw the GPS. He saw the video of him at Walmart buying the murder supplies. He knew it was over. He decided to cut a deal. He agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder and testify against Mark Sievers in exchange for a 25-year sentence. His testimony was chilling. He sat in the interrogation room and calmly explained how Mark had asked him to do it. He explained that Mark felt trapped. Mark claimed Teresa was going to take the kids away. Mark claimed she was abusive. He told me it was the only way, Curtis said. Mark had promised to pay them, not immediately, but from the life insurance money. He had offered $100,000 to kill the mother of his children. Curtis described the night of the murder. He and Jimmy Rogers waited in the garage. They cut the alarm system wire. They waited for hours in the humid Florida heat. When Teresa walked in, she didn't stand a chance. Jimmy Rogers attacked her first. Curtis finished the job. It wasn't a robbery. It was an execution ordered by the man she had kissed goodbye just that morning. 37:00, Chapter 7. The Trial of the Husband. In 2019, 4 years after the murder, Mark Sievers finally stood trial. He walked into the courtroom wearing a suit, looking thinner, his face unreadable. The prosecution laid out the case. The GPS, the rental car, the burner phones, and finally, the testimony of Curtis Wayne Wright. The defense tried to argue that Curtis and Jimmy went rogue. They claimed Mark had nothing to do with it. But the jury looked at the timeline. Why did Mark have a burner phone? Why did he delete the location history on his devices? Why did he never ask the police who did this, but instead focused on the insurance money? The most heartbreaking moment came when Teresa's family spoke. Her mother stood up, shaking. She looked at Mark, the man she had welcomed into her family, the father of her grandchildren. She didn't scream. She just cried. "You stole her light," she said. "You stole her from the world because you were greedy." The jury deliberated. It didn't take long. Guilty. First-degree murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. The judge looked at Mark Sievers. He saw a man who had betrayed the ultimate trust. A man who plotted the death of his wife while sleeping in the same bed. The sentence was death. Mark Sievers showed no emotion, no tears, no remorse, just the cold stare of a narcissist who was angry that his plan had failed. 41:30 conclusion, the broken vow. Today, Mark Sievers sits on death row in Florida. Curtis Wayne Wright is serving his 25 years. Jimmy Rogers is serving life in prison. The house in Bonita Springs was sold. The practice was closed. But the legacy of Dr. Teresa Sievers lives on in the patients she healed and the daughters she loved. This story is a terrifying reminder of the masks people wear. Teresa thought her biggest problems were taxes and a struggling marriage. She didn't know that the person she should fear the most wasn't a stranger in the night. It was the man who held her hand, the man who knew her schedule, the man who promised to love her until death do us part, and then made sure death came early. As you lay in the dark tonight, listening to the rain, hold your loved ones a little closer. Trust is a beautiful thing, but in the case of Teresa Sievers, trust was the weapon that killed her. Forests have a way of keeping secrets. The trees stand tall and silent, witnessing everything, saying nothing. In the dense woods of Allenstown, New Hampshire, the Bear Brook State Park is a place of beauty. Families go there to hike. Hunters go there to track deer. It is a place where life thrives. But in 1985, the forest decided to give up one of its darkest secrets. It was November, hunting season. A man was walking through a remote section of the woods, an area overgrown with brush, far from the main trails. He stumbled upon something that didn't belong there. A 55-gallon steel drum. A blue industrial barrel lying on its side, rusted, half buried in the falling autumn leaves. It looked like trash. Illegal dumping is common in these parts, but something about this barrel was wrong. It was heavy, and there was a smell, faint but distinct, leaking from the seams. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. The hunter approached. He peered inside a rusted opening. What he saw would haunt the nightmares of this small town for 3 decades. It wasn't trash. Inside that barrel, wrapped in industrial plastic, were human remains. A woman and a child. No ID. No clothes. No missing persons report matched them. They were just ghosts in a barrel. But the forest wasn't done speaking. 15 years later, yes, 15 years, a detective returned to that exact same spot to re-examine the scene. And just 100 yards away from where the first barrel was found, he found another one, another blue barrel. Inside, 2 more children, for bodies, for souls discarded like garbage in the deep woods. Who were they? Who killed them? And how does a man live a normal life knowing he left an entire family to rot in steel drums? Tonight, we unravel the most complex cold case in American history. A story that spans across the country, involves a killer with 1,000 faces, and a science that finally gave these lost souls their names back. Let's go back to 1985. When the hunter found the first barrel, the police were baffled. The autopsy revealed that the victims were a woman, aged 23 to 33, and a young girl, aged 5 to 11. They had been beaten to death. The violence was extreme, but there were no clues. The barrel itself was traced to a local trucking company, but hundreds of those barrels were used and discarded. It was a dead end. The victims became known as Jane Doe and Baby Jane Doe. They were buried in a local cemetery with a tombstone that simply read, "Here lies a mother and daughter, known only to God." The case went cold almost immediately. In the 80s, without DNA databases, without the internet, if you didn't have a name, you didn't have a lead. The seasons changed. The snow covered the ground. The leaves fell. and the barrel became a local legend, a scary story kids told at sleepovers. Fast forward to the year 2000. A cold case detective named Sergeant John Cody decided to take a fresh look. He felt that something was missed. He went back to the site in Brook State Park. He wasn't looking for a body. He was looking for clues. Maybe a weapon, maybe a piece of clothing. He walked the perimeter. He expanded the search radius. And there, hidden under 15 years of brush and decay, he saw the glint of blue metal. Another barrel. It was almost poetic in its horror. Just 100 yards from the first one. It had been there the whole time. While police were investigating the first crime scene in 1985, they were standing right next to the rest of the victims and didn't know it. Inside the second barrel were two more little girls. One was about 2 to 4 years old. The other was 1 to 3 years old. Now the tragedy was compounded. For females, 1 adult, 3 children. The working theory was obvious. This was a mother and her 3 daughters. A family annihilation. But who was the father? And why had no one reported an entire family missing? This is the scariest part of the transient lifestyle in America. If you move around enough, if you disconnect from your roots, you can vanish, and the world just keeps turning. To solve a crime in New Hampshire, we have to travel 3,000 miles away to California, and we have to jump forward in time to 2002. Meet a man named Gordon Jensen. Or maybe his name was Jerry Mockerman. Or Lawrence Vanner. He was a handyman, a drifter. He was charming, intelligent, but oddly secretive. He lived in Richmond, California, with a woman named Eunsoon Jun. Eunsoon was a chemist, a smart, independent woman, but she fell under the spell of this mysterious man. They had an unofficial wedding in her backyard, but soon, Eunsoon's family noticed things. He was controlling. He isolated her. And then, in 2002, Eunsoon disappeared. Police went to her house. They found Gordon Jensen. Let's call him the chameleon, acting strange. They searched the basement, and there, buried under a massive pile of cat litter, was the body of Eunsoon Jun. He had killed her, dismembered her, and tried to hide the smell. He was arrested, but when police took his fingerprints, they found something baffling. His fingerprints didn't match Gordon Jensen. They matched a man named Curtis Kimball, who had been arrested years earlier for drunk driving. But who was Curtis Kimball? It turned out that was a fake name too. This man had no identity. He was a ghost. While this man, the chameleon, was in prison for killing Eunsoon, police discovered another dark chapter of his life. Years earlier, in the late 80s, he had a little girl with him, a 5-year-old named Lisa. He had abandoned her at an RV park in California. He just left her there and ran away. Lisa was taken into foster care. She grew up, was adopted, and lived a good life. But when the chameleon was arrested for murder in 2002, police did a DNA test. They compared his DNA to Lisa's DNA, thinking she was his daughter. The results were shocking. He was not her father. So who was Lisa? And where did he get her? Did he kidnap her? Did he kill her real parents? The police asked him in prison. He just smiled. He spoke in riddles. He was arrogant. He told them, "You are doing the work of a student. You will never figure out who I am." In 2010, the man known as Gordon Jensen / Curtis Kimball died in prison. He died of natural causes, taking his real name and his secrets to the grave. At this point, you might be asking, what does a killer in California have to do with the barrels in New Hampshire? The year is now 2017. The Brook murders in New Hampshire are still unsolved. The mystery of Lisa's real identity in California is still unsolved. Two different cold cases on opposite sides of the country. Enter Dr. Barbara Ray Venter, a genetic genealogist. She is the hero of this story. She took the DNA of the chameleon, the killer who died in prison, and uploaded it to public ancestry databases. She built a family tree, reverse engineering his identity. It took thousands of hours. It was like finding a needle in a haystack of DNA. But finally, she found a cousin, then an uncle, and finally, she found a name. The chameleon's real name was Terry Rasmussen, born in Colorado, a Navy veteran. Now that they had his real name, they could track his movements through history. They looked at his employment records, and there it was. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Terry Rasmussen wasn't in California. He was living in Manchester, New Hampshire. He was working as an electrician at a shop, just a few miles from Brook State Park. The police went into overdrive. They tested the DNA of the victims in the barrels against Terry Rasmussen's DNA. The result was the final piece of the puzzle. The middle child, the one aged 2 to 4 found in the second barrel, was his biological daughter. Terry Rasmussen had killed his own child. But what about the woman and the other 2 girls? They were not related to him biologically. Police started looking for women who dated Rasmussen in New Hampshire in the late 70s. They found a name, Marlies Honeychurch. Marlies was a young mother. She had 2 daughters, Marie and Sarah. In 1978, she got into an argument with her family in California. She introduced them to her new boyfriend, a man named Bob Evans, one of Rasmussen's aliases. She told her mother, "We are leaving. You won't see us again." And she meant it. She took her 2 daughters and left with him. No one ever heard from Marlies Honeychurch again. DNA confirmed it. The woman in the barrel was Marlies. The oldest child and the youngest child were Marie and Sarah. And the middle child? She was Rasmussen's daughter from a different, unknown woman who has never been identified. Here is the reconstruction of the nightmare. Terry Rasmussen lured Marlies and her children to New Hampshire under the guise of a new life. He lived with them under the name Bob Evans. Sometime around 1980 or 1981, he killed them. He beat them to death. He stuffed them into industrial barrels that he likely stole from his workplace. He dumped them in the woods he knew well, but he kept one child alive for a while, his own daughter, and then he killed her too. After wiping out this entire family, he simply moved on. He moved to California. He picked up another woman, the mother of Lisa. He likely killed her too. She remains unidentified, and kept Lisa as a prop to appear like a normal single father. Then he abandoned Lisa. Then he met Soon Jun, and he killed her. Terry Rasmussen wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who consumed families. He used women and children as camouflage to blend into society. When he was done with them, he discarded them like trash and changed his name. In 2019, a beautiful ceremony was held in New Hampshire. The tombstone that read, "Known only to God," was removed. A new stone was placed. It bears the names Marlies Elizabeth Honeychurch, Marie Elizabeth Vaughn, Sarah Lynn McWaters, and for the 4th child, Rasmussen's daughter, the name remains unidentified. She is the last secret he took to hell with him. This case changed everything. It proved that DNA and genealogy could solve the impossible. It led directly to the capture of the Golden State Killer a year later. But the victory is bittersweet, because for 30 years, those girls lay in the cold, dark woods, while the man who killed them lived a life of freedom. This story reminds us that monsters don't look like monsters. Terry Rasmussen was a neighbor, a boyfriend, a worker, He was the man standing next to you in line at the grocery store. And his greatest weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was his ability to make us forget. Tonight, as the rain falls, let's remember Marlies, Marie, and Sarah. They are no longer just bodies in barrels. They are people, and they are finally home. Good night, and stay safe.